All right. Now on the Millennial Sales Podcast, we got my man, Anthony Natoli. Anthony, happy Friday, man. What's going on?
Happy Friday, brother. Excited to be here. Not much, just another day in paradise.
I hear you. I feel like, something that people are probably surprised by if they're not deep into the, world of LinkedIn and the sales and SaaS world on LinkedIn is like how you can actually make real, relationships and friendships through, the platform and getting to know people that way. And you're one of the people that, I've really hit it off with in the last few months. So I'm stoked to have you on, excited to share your story. And I'm ready to let's help some people out today.
Let's do it, man. Yeah, I share the same sentiment. I'm really pumped to be here and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, for sure, man. So let's get cracking. Let's hear the overview of like, how you got started in sales. I know you went to University of Arizona. I don't know if sales was like on your radar when you were in school, or you had, parents or family members that were in the craft like before, or how did this all kind of start for you?
Yeah. Such a good question. And it's kind of a funny story. So, my dad was a VP of sales and now is a CEO of a publishing and media company. And, he always told me, he's like, you'd be really good at sales, because the reality is I was never good in school. Yeah. I just didn't enjoy it at all. So I was never going to be a doctor, was never going to be a lawyer. And so, the very few schools that accepted me, one of them was U of A in Arizona. And I probably changed my major 3 times in the first week. I was pre-law, I was sports journalism, and then I was business. And then I ended up doing a mixture of finance and commercial real estate. And the plan when I graduated was to do commercial real estate or sports journalism. I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to move back east to New York and work and live in Manhattan, until one of my fraternity brothers approached me with an opportunity to get into fintech in San Francisco, which was really like a 70-person company that wasn't really fintech. And it was really just like cold calling mortgage brokers and getting yelled at them all day long. And so I moved to San Francisco after I graduated, got into that. Because it was a 70-person company, there was a lot of opportunity. The CEO was young. He lived in my neighborhood in San Francisco, so I got pretty close with him. I graduated from being a BDR to actually like kind of selling. But again, it was finance. It was mortgages. It wasn't really sales as we know it in SaaS. And so, I took what my dad told me in high school about my kind of street smarts and my natural curiosity and my ambition and my emotional intelligence, and kind of ran with it. And I found a lot of success and I learned a ton. However, I hit my head on a ceiling personally and professionally with that company. And then, though I was like an account executive in finance, I knew that in order to break into SaaS, I had to start at the ground level. And so that's when I started exploring SDR jobs at the age of 24, 25. I forget exactly how old I was, but I was 3 years out of college, and then kind of started at the ground level up at Demandbase. Was an SDR there for 9 months, and then got promoted to an AE. And 4 or 5 years later, here I am at Outreach. So that's kind of the high level story of how I got into sales and where I'm at now.
So let's dive into a few things. Let's start with school. Were you a kid that like you tried hard in school and you just like the learning piece was really tough for you, or you like just didn't really give a shit, or what was the vibe?
Never gave a shit.
Yeah.
I think I got a D in like Greek mythology in like sophomore year, like the easiest class. And I was just like, it just wasn't for me. But it's interesting, whenever I took those business classes around, communicating with people is when my ears would perk up. Mm-hmm. I never liked studying, but I always loved presenting and talking to people and working in groups. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really care about like school. And to be honest, most of the things I studied in school, like I'm not even doing today, calculus or algebra, I'm not even applying it into my world, but the connections I built and the the times where I was challenged personally in college, I think definitely is helping me out more than like the actual schooling part. But yeah, I didn't really care or apply myself as much as I probably should have. But it is what it is at this point.
Yeah. You learned at some point. Was there, and you're from New York, right? Or New Jersey?
So I grew up in Jersey, like the central part of Jersey. So yeah.
And was there like a big, was it a big decision to like go out to Arizona and then you went straight from Arizona to San Francisco? Was that, for me, as someone that grew up in Boston, went to school there, was living there for about 9 months, and then made a hard left turn to San Francisco. Like that was one of the best decisions I ever made, just to like get outside the nest and just like put myself in a new place. Did you feel the same way? Was that like a pretty monumental shift for you personally, just like to be away from family and friends and stuff like that?
Totally. Yeah. If I think about my life, it's like a map, and the map is made up of different directions you can take it. And I firmly believe I am where I am today because of the decisions I've made in the past. So I've always been someone who's just kind of like, screw it, let's try it out. And so, I didn't get accepted into many schools on the East Coast that I actually wanted to go to. And one of my best friends is basically like my cousin. His cousin went to U of A, and I visited there. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is amazing. And so I did it. I jumped in. It was scary, of course, but I learned at a very young age. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on it now, putting myself in that really uncomfortable position was going to be a theme for me for the next 8 years doing that. So I put myself in that uncomfortable position, only knew one person from home that went there, met a bunch of people on my floor in the dorm, and the rest is history there. And then similarly to how I took the leap to Arizona, my mom was so excited, like I'm getting my son home. And then I'm like, actually, I'm going to try this other thing out in San Francisco again. And I'll tell you what, San Francisco, the 5 years I was there were the most transformable years of my life. And I truly don't think I'm here talking to you without those years. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but those years were up, and they were also very down and scary, but also a ton of lessons learned to shape who I am today. So to answer your question, I'm a firm believer in putting yourself in those weird, uncomfortable positions that people are like, what is he even doing? Like, he's never going to make it in Arizona. He's never going to make it in San Francisco. But I said, screw it, and let's try it out. Because at the end of the day, I could always move home. So
there's always like, it's nice to know that there's always that security blanket if you need it. But at a young age, to get out from where, what's comfortable and what that's the advice I always give to people that I know that are in college or young. It's like, take a job in Dallas, in North Dakota, in Colorado, like it's just somewhere else that, is not known to you. And you're going to learn a lot more about yourself that way and put yourself in kind of unique positions. Cause it's just even just like making friends as an adult in a new city is just like, it doesn't sound like it, but that's just a tough skill. It's a lot harder when you're 24 or 25 to just like meet like-minded people than I feel like it is when you're in school and you're in classes together and, living in the dorms or whatever it may be.
100% agreed.
So let's get into you were at Ethos, if that's how you say Ethos Lending. And then you made your way. You're like, all right, I want to get into tech. I'm going to start over as an SDR after a few years of sales experience, humble yourself, probably took a pay cut, I'm imagining.
Yep.
And so you get in there. What was kind of like the early days of being an SDR there?
Yeah, I was so excited because, naturally a lot of SDRs are kind of just graduating college, and I had all this experience and I knew how to like figure shit out. And so I was like, I got this. Like, I'm going to come in and make a huge impact. And then I quickly realized, I was like, oh, damn, there's a lot to learn. Like, what is this ABM stuff? Like, what's a marketer care about? Like, how do I work with an AE? But thankfully, I don't want to like brag or anything, but I'm not book smart, but I have like this emotional intelligence where I can just like figure things out, and I know who to talk to, and I know where to get help. And I know how to like do my own research. And so I did a lot of that. And I used a lot of that kind of natural, like charisma and ambition and persistence. And I started to like figure out like, okay, who are the best people on the team? What are they doing? Who are the eight? Cause when I came in, I was like, dude, in 9 to 12 months, I'm becoming an AE. Like that's my mission. So what do I need to do every single day to get there? And I started to figure out, okay, become really tight with my AEs, put time on the calendar and get coffee with the mid-market VP and the manager, and reach out to the CRO, who's now the CEO at the time, and become close with him. And whenever our VP of sales development was asking us to do something, I always was the first person to, put myself out there to help. I was speaking up in team meetings. I was sharing on like day 5, I was sharing email tips. Now, I think that pissed a lot of people off. It's like, who's this new guy coming in super hot? But dude, that's just how I am. And I think, I was definitely like intimidated from the like product and like structure side, but I used that experience from the past and like who I am as a person as my advantage to like push through that. And then, I like to think of it as the intangibles, the unteachables, and I can learn the rest of the stuff later. So that was like my thought process in the beginning. It's like, okay, let me use my intangibles and just like have the enablement team or the leaders like kind of coach me on best practices. So like kind of diving in head first, failing hard, failing quick, and then learning, fast as well.
There's so much to be said about, it should go without saying that if you want to rise through the ranks, you got to hit numbers. You got to be at or near the top of the leaderboard for whatever you're being measured on. But there's this whole other kind of group of things that I think people, especially when they're first starting, overlook, right? And it's being the person that speaks up in the team meeting. It's having those coffee sessions with your AEs, with the managers, with the VP, like being well known, talking to marketing, talking to all these different people, and the internal kind of selling and networking that you need to do to put yourself in position. So when there's an opening, it's not even a question. It's like, yeah, Anthony's our guy. Did someone coach you on that? Or was that just like you mentioned before, kind of like your EQ, and you're just like, this is the game plan, and I'm just going to attack this with everything that I've got?
Yeah. Honestly, no one told me kind of like that's what I should do. It's just like naturally comes to me. And it's sometimes a strength. It's also sometimes a weakness. Like it can rub people the wrong way when I come in super hot. But yeah, it was a natural inclining that I had that this was the right path. And I knew that other people on the team were hitting their numbers also. So what I thought about was like, how can I stand out? How can I become like the guy, like the rookie of the year? To your point, when it came time to make a decision at the end of 9 months, I kind of had leverage because not only was I hitting my numbers, but I already built a relationship with the mid-market manager. So where she was looking for additional headcount, she wanted me.
Right.
And it wasn't even a question of my VP or the manager to promote me. It was like, is 9 months too quick to piss other people on the team off?
Yeah.
It wasn't that I wasn't ready. It was like, how do we not piss everyone else off? So like, there was even an opportunity for me to get promoted quicker because there was an open headcount, but I couldn't because of like HR stuff, right? 6 months was too quick. So I had to wait till that 9 month mark. But it was just natural for me I'm always looking for ways to stand out amongst the crowd. I view it as like a challenge, and it's something that I did, when I got promoted to an AE and when I joined Outreach. It's like, how can I become the guy and build my brand,
Yeah, there's always, if you ask any leader, they probably don't want to share it, but they have 1 or 2 people on their team that are their go-to people. And it's like, if we need a deal at the end of the quarter, who am I leaning on? If we need to promote someone, who's my person I talk about? When the CRO comes to me and asks me about my team, who's the 1 or 2 people that I bring up? And you want to be that person. And again, part of it is the obvious, you want to be smashing your number, but the other part is like, you're sharing tips with the team. That's helpful, not just like to put yourself on, but like you're sharing helpful, hey, here's what I did and I failed, and here's what I learned from it, or here's this email, sequence that's really working well for me, or here's a call recording of me where, I handled this objection or this competitive thing. And, here's a process that I created that you guys can all steal. All that stuff is really important. You alluded to before, kind of like the ups and downs personally and professionally, the first few years of your career. I'd love to kind of get into that story and how they maybe paralleled. I don't know if things were up in one area and down in the other at different times or at the same time, but I'd love to kind of hear, that story as well.
Yeah, man. So I think whenever I think about like struggle in the present, it always stems from something in the past. So, for as long as I can remember, going back to like elementary school, middle school, I was always like this outspoken class clown type who always felt the need to do more than he had to get validation from others. And, high school, middle school, that may have looked a little bit different than what that validation seeking maybe looked like in college or professionally. So the thing is, though, it just never went away. And I was always just never confident and comfortable with who Anthony was. I didn't know who he was. I was lost. I was super insecure for my entire life. And I still, get insecurities today, but my relationship with it is just different. I'm aware of it, so I can work on it. But back, when I just started out professionally, I was partying a bunch and I got into a pretty toxic relationship that threw me for a loop. And, it wasn't until I think that relationship ended, which was also the time that I started the SDR job, that like my life really went into chaos mode. Personally, I was not prioritizing my mental health. I didn't even know, I was like, I don't need help with that. Like,
yeah,
I got this. Like I'm working at a cool tech startup and I got all these friends and I make people laugh. And, I go out and buy everyone drinks when we go out. Like I'm the guy that like everyone wants to be around. Like I don't need, like everything's fine. I got it all figured out. I was, gambling a ton. I was spending more than I was making. I was, also like really bad habit with eating bad food and just not taking care of myself mentally and physically. And after that relationship and same time I joined Demand Base, I was kind of like spiraling, but I didn't even know it, right? I was living in this fantasy land of just like what the hell was even going on at that time. I have no idea. I was, ruining my reputation with people. I was, a very needy person. And that came off in, I was only an SDR for 9 months. And though I did well, I was super unhappy with me as a person. I was, 40 to 50 pounds overweight. And then I got promoted to being an AE. And at the same time, my life was still spiraling. And that first 9 months of ramping, I wasn't like doing shit. I wasn't closing anything.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was stemming from, my first time being a true SaaS sales professional. Because in my personal life, I was attaching my self-worth to all this external stuff. I took that to being in sales. I would predicate my self-worth on a deal closing or a discovery call not going well. And as a result, I would show up just like super anxious, not only with my teammates, but on deals. And I would be super needy and insecure. And I wasn't being myself. Like, I just felt I wasn't being myself. And as a result, like I did really bad. And I was so stressed out. Like I couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up in the morning and all I was doing was like just going right to work and like eating bad food and being hungover. And again, still gambling and spending more than my life was chaos, but I wasn't having success at work either. So it was a mess. Until one point in the summer, we were at a mid-year meeting in New York. And this was like going into year 2 of me being a rep. I was closing some deals, but still like life was a mess. And I went home a few days early. My dog, my family's dog just had passed away, unfortunately. So I'd put him down and I was 60 pounds overweight, neck deep in debt. And I sat with my parents and I just broke down. And I said, I can't live like this anymore. My clothes weren't fitting. it was just a horrible place to be in physically and mentally. And that was the summer. And I always wanted to change, but I went a few more months after that, like continuing down the path until it was like Thanksgiving of that same year of the summer, where my mom had caught me, continuing to gamble, and I had this problem in the past. So, I told her I'd stopped, and basically she kicked me out of the house, and she said that, you're not allowed to come home for Christmas or back into the family until you get the help you needed. And that was the oh shit moment for me, where I'm sitting there over 6 figures deep in debt, personal loans, credit cards, 60 pounds overweight, basically obese, with a job that I have that everything on the outside seems like I'm just doing so well, but in reality, I'm just like so broken. And so, I hit, it was funny enough, like the next year I ended up hitting President's Club and everything like that. But it wasn't until I realized that like my life was completely unmanageable and chaos. And I admitted and accepted that and really felt it. And, that conversation with my mom and sitting at the airport for 12 hours when she kicked me out, the thoughts that went through my head, I had 2 choices. It was like, do I continue down this path and like say, screw it and throw myself a pity party? Or do I take control back over my life and figure out how do I climb Mount Everest, basically, And I went back and forth. I was like, Will, how the hell am I going to lose 60 pounds? How the hell am I going to pay off $100,000 of debt? How the hell am I going to do well in my job while doing this? How am I going to build trust back with my family? All these thoughts, I was like, I was just looking ahead and I was like, there's no way. Like, I may as well just surrender to all of this and just like let go, because I don't know what to do. I'm still here and I'm doing better. So I made that choice. There's 2 paths I could have taken, and I went down the path of like rediscovering who I am and getting the help that I needed. So like, I know that was kind of long-winded, but yeah, there certainly were parallels to how I performed in work and the chaos that my life was at the time. 100%.
Yeah, man. I mean, I feel like there's been a few folks that have come on the pod and have shared that type of story. I feel like in different ways was in a similar spot. It's easy to get in that spot when you're early in sales, right? Because you get that ego boost of, being a top SDR or a top rep. You can make some pretty good money. How you want to spend that money is, can go in a lot of different ways. You could save it, invest it. You could drop, $100 on tequila shots for everyone. You can drop it on $1,000 on the 49ers. There's a new bag, shoes, whatever your potential vice is. And so there's a lot of areas that can go into. And so when you hit that bottom spot around Thanksgiving, and you're kind of contemplating that, and it seems like you got 2 paths and you're leaning towards one, or you decide mentally, I'm going to choose one. Like, what do you do from there? Like, what do you actually, what happens next?
Yeah. It's funny, right? It's like, all right, how do I like start? And for anyone listening out there, the first step, and like this is like funny because like the 12-step program can be applied to literally changing anything in your life. The first step is like accepting and admitting that you need help and that you have a problem. And so I looked at the areas of my life that I needed help. It was with my weight loss, it was with managing money, and it was with my mental health. As soon as I accepted that I needed the help and that those areas of my life needed to be addressed, that's when I was able to like surrender and say, hey, listen, I obviously don't have any control over this right now. Let me go find help. And what was nice was, my mom, she means everything to me. The next day, she's like, she sent me a text and I still have it. It was something like, you're going to figure this out. Like, I have your back. And that was like, okay, like that was so powerful, man. I read it back sometimes because it reminds me, our relationship is so much different now. And it's amazing, but yeah, just to know that I had that support system coupled with accepting that I really needed to make a change, was when things started to open up. Like my brain started to expand consciously of like, oh, wow, I'm spending so much money. Oh, wow, I overeat. Oh, wow, I do all of these things and I can make changes. I can go see a therapist who's going to help me. I can go into a 12-step program for my gambling. I can start working out again. Like there's so many things in my control that I didn't realize for so long. And so it all starts with like accepting and wanting to make a change for yourself, because I wanted to change for a long time, but I never accepted that I had a problem. I was so ignorant to it. Right. When I said before, I was like, I don't need help. I don't need to prioritize my mental health. I don't need to do all this. Like, I got it. As soon as you let go of the I got it, then you can start making changes. And it goes for sales as well. It's like, if you're someone who just thinks like your shit doesn't stink and you're just crushing it, but you're not getting the results you want, until you can let go of that ego and say, hey, maybe I should go seek out a coach or a mentor, or ask my manager for additional help, or ask one of the senior reps on the team, you're going to continue to run into the same wall. So how it gets started is with that self-acceptance and admitting to yourself that you need some help. And for those listening, it's totally okay. Like, it's cool to ask for help. The best people that I know are ones that speak their needs and seek help from others. So, don't look at it as something as a negative.
I couldn't agree more. What year is this? Like Thanksgiving, and then going into like, how long ago was this?
Yeah, this is Thanksgiving of 2019.
Okay. Got it. So we get into, the new year, you're kind of on this new path, personally, professionally. Was it once you made the decision and once you kind of started to take steps, did you start to see pretty quick improvement in all areas? And then it kind of turns into this flywheel where you keep going, or did you meet some initial resistance and it was kind of rocky? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it goes back to putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions. It was like, I didn't want to eat healthy anymore. Like, it was so uncomfortable. I didn't want to eat healthy initially. I didn't want to go to therapy. Like, I didn't want to go to these Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Like, that was all so uncomfortable and scary for me. So yeah, I was met with resistance. But back to what I said about putting myself in uncomfortable positions being a theme of my life and not knowing it back then and how it would turn out, like going to U of A, moving to San Francisco, it just naturally allowed, like going through all those things, like subconsciously allowed me to keep pushing through. I knew that in order to get what I wanted, which was a new way of living and thinking, I had to put myself in these uncomfortable positions. So, 2020 rolls around and I've got this motivation, but I knew that from like, I read a book, Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink. And I quickly learned that motivation that I had in January was going to go away. So it was time that I started to build some habits. And then I read The Power of Habit, and I started reading all these self-help books and learning that in order to really stay consistent, I had to build discipline. So, of course the motivation like went away on some days. Like, did I want to leave at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday to go to therapy? No, but I knew that was what was required for me to get what I wanted. And I always went back to, if I don't do this, my life will go back to what it was. And I'm there again sitting. I picture me sitting in the kitchen with my mom and telling her I'm not allowed back in the family unless I get help. And then I say, okay, let's keep pushing forward, because I have the power to control this. This is something in my control. Let's keep pushing forward.
And so how did this in 2020, you're demand-based still?
Yep. I'm in demand-based, and then, COVID hits. And that's a whole nother ball game as well.
So how did this, kind of personal journey, right? You're in the gutter and you're kind of scrapping your way out day by day. How did that affect you, from a sales perspective? Did it just like coincide and you started to just sell the shit out of demand base and then outreach, and it was just like, you started to crush it, or were the results like in parallel, or how'd it go?
Yeah. So funny enough, and I think there is a parallel, that in 2020, I hit President's Club as an AE for the first time. And that was the year I started to really prioritize myself. And I learned that life and being in sales are literally like the same. It's like the rep that has a big pipeline and doesn't like attach their self-worth is going to be the rep that is asking the right questions and usually coming out on top. And it's like, you know, dating, right? Like I used to be super insecure and needy with women. And as soon as I started to like fulfill my life with like abundant things and activities and realizing that my life was like full and I didn't need these external things to make me happy and full, like life just got so much better. And so as the days went on of me prioritizing myself and going to therapy and learning all these things, I realized that me hitting my quota and focusing all my energy on like winning or losing a deal wasn't serving me anymore. Like those thoughts did not serve me. They did not do me well. And so I said, okay, how can I apply what I'm learning outside of work to work? And that's just like taking things one day at a time, controlling the controllables, and the outcomes are just like a cherry on top, because I now view it as if I do everything in my power each day to win a deal, or if I lose a deal, like I can sleep well at night because I know that I'm doing everything that I can. And, you know, if I win a deal, great. That dopamine rush lasts for 20 minutes and it's on to the next one. If I lose a deal, thank God I lost that deal because now I can learn from it. So like, it's just a mindset shift, man. And, you know, I had to make that change in my life where I had to realize that whether it was a closing a deal or not getting invited out with a friend or, you know, getting dumped, none of that external stuff made me less or more of a person. Everything that you are as a person is already inside you. You kind of just got to peel back the layers to really be comfortable with who you are. And once you're in that spot, it's like, not to say you're untouchable, but you're just like super self-aware. And if you get hung up on or you get a really bad email, you can now be aware that like, okay, that sucks, but it doesn't mean that Anthony's like a shitty person.
Right.
And that's a huge, huge shift that I had to make.
Yeah. I talked about this with your buddy, Vin, who's also currently at Demand Base, just around doing hard shit and how important that is. And that could mean, you know, for him, he likes to do, you know, different races and challenges and stuff like that. I think, you know, all the things that you've talked about, you know, going to Gamblers Anonymous, you know, working out, eating healthy, you know, working on your mindfulness, you know, and your mental health, going to therapy, all these different things. And then all the hard things you have to do in sales to be successful, like consistent prospecting, you know, handling rejection, doing, you know, reading some of those self-help books, you know, probably, you know, following folks on LinkedIn or listening to podcasts and, you know, improving your craft. You know, every time that you make a decision to do the hard thing, it's just like you're adding a little bit to the piggy bank, right? And it's just like, you don't really see it in one thing, like one work going for a run, like doesn't really change it. That one run doesn't. But if you do it every single day and you're doing all of these things, they add up so that when you reach adversity the next time you lose a deal, you know, something happens in your personal life, you've built up this wall of kind of like resistance to that you're able to handle that. And, you know, I'm such a strong believer that if you want to be a better salesperson, you got to work on yourself as a person first and all the things that means. And the results follow from that. You know, the most successful people I know in sales or in sales leadership, I mean, they're solid as a rock, you know, just with themselves, and they carry themselves in a different way. And you just feel that when you see them, you know, through the Zoom screen or in person. You're just like, this person, like, they've got it figured out. They've got themselves figured out. Maybe not completely, but they're in a good spot. And that's why they're able to perform at such a high level month after month, year after year.
Yeah. It's the, I try to talk about this on LinkedIn, but it's like, in order to be like an elite sales professional, and I think being elite means being like happy regardless of how well or bad you're doing, you got to be an elite human. Like you've got to really prioritize yourself, because that's where it all stems from. So I think you make a really good point there.
And like, you know, when you think about high performing, you know, athletes or actors or any type of performer, you know, business people, you know, there's a lot of science behind this. There's a lot of science behind, you know, what are you eating? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping? Do you have some sort of mindfulness routine? You know, and are you reading or developing yourself in other ways, and what that does cognitively, so that when you're ready to perform, you know, you're gung ho and you're ready on that call, or you're ready on that meeting. and you're at the highest level of yourself. And, if you go and there's obviously a lot of, translations from like sports to business and to sales, which is maybe overdone, but I think is very apt. Steph Curry is out there, not only is he just shooting 1,000,000 3-pointers, but he's sleeping 9 hours a night. He's working with a sports psychologist. He's doing all these other things to get himself ready for the next game. And I think there's a ton of power for salespeople to lean into that and know that, all of these different factors are going to impact not only how you perform, but then also how you feel about whatever that performance is for, just a healthy and successful life.
100%, man. It's funny. It's like, I love Kobe and MJ, not for like their flashiness on the court, but for the work that they put in that no one sees. Like that's the shit that fires me up. Like, yeah. I respect people who are putting in that work and taking care of themselves, because the results don't come unless you do that. And I think most people don't realize that. But it's something I'm grateful that like I went through all the shit that I did, because I'm aware of it now. Like I know what it takes. I've been through it. I know what it takes to prioritize yourself, and it's work, but it's very fruitful at the end of the day if you do prioritize yourself and do the right things. And without those hard times, there's no growth. And that's why most people don't dive into doing hard things, and they never fulfill their potential. And they are sitting there 80 years old with tons of regret. Once I realized that could be me, it became really hard to ignore what I needed to do every day to really prioritize myself to reach that full potential or purpose. So yeah, it's a little bit scary when you think about it like that. It's like,
yeah,
shit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only probably regret is like wishing that you had started sooner. You know what I mean? It's like that's what I think about. It's like, man, I wish like I never read. The only book I read before I was 23 was probably Goodnight Moon when I was like, a toddler.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, I wish I knew some, Napoleon Hill or some Dale Carnegie when I was 15, not when I was, 23. And I wish I was, knew about psychology and, different workouts and all this stuff. Like, I'm glad I know it now, but I wish, everyone who was 15 years old knew about this type of stuff and it was taught in schools. And I just can only imagine how much better I feel like society would be and how much happier and more productive and everything that folks would be if they were taught some of this stuff. So hopefully, there's some folks listening, if they're SDRs or AEs that are in a spot that you've been or can relate to your story, that it's like, maybe this gives them the nudge to, change things around a little bit.
Yeah. And Tom, the beautiful thing is, though we didn't have it, we know it now and we can give it back. And so like, that's what life is about, is like going through some stuff, wishing you did things differently, but now we're doing things differently. And I think you talked about this on one of your podcasts you did with someone else, but there's someone out there 2 or 3 years behind us that needs to hear this.
Yeah.
So that they don't get to where I was, rock bottom. We can help them realize that it's okay to seek help or, make changes in your life. So I think that's the beauty of it, man. It's like, once you go through some stuff, you realize the importance of giving that gift back to other people. And, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Let me hit you with some rapid fires. Let the audience know a little bit more about you. First of all, huge learners on this pod. You mentioned a few books earlier. You mentioned Jocko. You mentioned Power of Habit. Curious if there's any others that have made a significant impact with you as a person, as a seller, anything that really has stood out to you.
Yeah. So The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Yeah. It's like one of my favorites. You got Relentless by Tim Grover, which we always talk about. And then there's another guy that I love to follow. He's not in sales at all. His name's Nick Bear. He owns Bear Performance Nutrition. He has a podcast. This guy is an absolute animal, both physically, but also mentally. And, as you've heard from me, I'm big into prioritizing what it takes to be an elite human. And that guy is just an absolute beast. So One other guy I love is Mark Manson. He's just very like, calls it like he sees it, 100% straight shooter. And so like his books I've read as well. So those are the people that I'm currently listening to, following, looking on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. How about anyone from, I'm not sure if you mentioned Nick Bear's podcast, but any other podcasts that you listen to, either personally or professionally, and then anyone on like LinkedIn that you've been digging from the sales world that, you've been learning from or been following along with recently?
Yeah. So, like podcast wise, I really don't listen to too many like professional podcasts, but in terms of a sales book that I recently read, The Qualified Sales Leader, is really, really solid. And then people on LinkedIn that I love, gosh, there's so many, but Ian Cognac is awesome. Yeah. The guys from 30 Minutes to President's Club, just like the stuff they put out. Brandon Flaherty is someone that he like really is dialed in on like his systems and how it helps him perform at a high level. So those are some people that I'm following right now that I admire pretty highly.
+1 to all of those. What goes on in Anthony's headphones music wise?
Yeah. So it depends on the day, but I could be listening to like deep house, EDM. Big fan of that. I love like old school hip hop, like Jay-Z, Nas, Biggie, but I also love like New Day, J. Cole, Kendrick. So I'm bumping that. And then I also love like kickback alternative from like early 2000s. So a little emo vibe, maybe, depending on the day. There's some good throwbacks, but yeah, that's what I'm listening to.
I dig it. We've talked about a number of these things already, but just curious, what comes to mind when you think about like how you recharge, either after a long day of work or on the weekends, or how you kind of get away from work, fuel yourself up so you can get back in there and get after it?
Yeah. Do the things that like in the back of your head, you should be doing, but you don't feel like doing. So for me, that's like getting my butt up and going to get some sun and taking a quick walk. It's like, for me, at least, my brain's just like, so like it goes to procrastinating and being lazy. And so I just got to get up and do it. And I feel so much better. I also love to meditate. I love the Peloton. I love to read. And some days I just like to sit and just like do nothing. So like, that's okay too. I think it's important to know though, when the difference between your body needing a rest and your mind needing a rest versus being lazy. So just like make sure you walk that fine line. And like, I love dogs. So if I'm ever scrolling Instagram, I don't really do it anymore, but I'm looking at dogs. And I love spending time with my family and my baby niece who's just turned 1. I'm a very lucky guy. I've got a lot of good stuff in my life.
Shout out to your niece.
Yeah, she's epic.
What you've been putting out some really great LinkedIn content as it relates to prospecting. What's 1 or 2 tips for folks if they're SDRs or AEs trying to source pipeline that have worked for you?
Yeah. So number 1 is be intentional with your prospecting, right? I think we oftentimes just like reach out to people to reach out to them when we don't have a real reason or know why we're actually reaching out to them. So I think step 1 is like, before you ever reach out to anyone, you need to know why your company may be a good fit for them and what problems you can solve. So know that account like the back of your hand. And when you actually go to reach out to them, create a hypothesis of why you're reaching out in the first place. I think that'll really help. And then the second thing is create a system that you can easily follow. So for AEs out there, what I like to do is I just select 2 accounts per week and I focus 5 people at each of those accounts and I sequence them and then I start executing tasks. That allows me to manage prospecting so I don't push it off. It's like, come on, Ant, it's 2 accounts. You can't do 2 accounts. And it helps me have an honest conversation with myself. It's like, you're really going to ignore 2 accounts. These are your future customers. Like, let's go. And then I use that research that I've done with my intentional prospecting to then actually execute my messaging with those prospects. And then let's all remove the fluff. No one cares that it's, happy Friday. Let's get to the point. Let's make sure we use that relevance. in a prospecting or cold call scenario, it's like, let's get to the point of, the research we've done and why we're reaching out. And especially in emails too, because the first thing that someone sees in an email is that happy Friday, and everyone's saying happy Friday today.
Yeah.
So let's stand out in that first line and use that relevancy, that personalization that I talked about in step one. So those would be my three things that I think you could do today. If you're an SDR or AE.
Love it. My last one for you. Who do you want to come see next on the Millennial Sales Podcast?
Oh gosh. So I would love, so there's a new AE manager for SMB team at Outreach. Her name's Clara Johnson. She has so much good stuff to say. It's just, she doesn't post it on LinkedIn too often. But she's awesome. And she's someone that I admire. She definitely prioritizes mindfulness and mental health. And she was an individual contributor and now is leading a team at Outreach. So I think that could be really interesting. And then someone else would be Eric or Darren McKee. They have such epic stories about how they got to where they are, and they're doing some cool stuff right now of helping people. So I think any of those three people would be awesome people to have on the pod. I wanted to make sure that I included a diverse group there. Yeah,
we got the SaaS Bros coming on.
Nice.
They've been recommended a few times, so we're working out the logistics on that. And I'll hit you up on an intro for Clara. I'd love to meet her.
Yeah, she's awesome.
My man, I appreciate the time this morning. I appreciate you being vulnerable and open with your story. And hopefully this helps some folks that are, again, in a similar spot or have been in a similar spot. And so you're doing great work. I have to say, before I let you talk about yourself and where folks can find you, that you are absolutely one of the best people to follow on LinkedIn. And I'm not just saying that, both in terms of, sharing real stories about your journey, personally and professionally, but also some of those very tactical points like you just made around prospecting and 3 tips that SDRs and AEs can use to create more pipeline, to get promoted, to close more deals. And so it's a great mix. And so I appreciate you. I'll let you share any other ways that folks can get in touch with you if they like what they heard today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. That's the goal. I just want to help people as much as possible. So yeah, LinkedIn's a great place to find me. Shoot me a DM, always open to chatting. And then I haven't released my first edition of my free newsletter called Notes from Natoli, but I've got about 100 people pre-subscribed. And if you want to get subscribed before the first edition drops, it's anthonynatoli.me. And you can find the link on my LinkedIn as well. Again, it's a free weekly newsletter where I share more tactical and stuff that I've been through and just real life stuff that hopefully resonates and you can relate to. And then might be working on something else with a friend that will have some more information coming soon.
TBD.
So stay posted there.
TBD. My man, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. And everyone else will be back next week with a new episode.
Peace.